Hey, good afternoon and good evening, everyone, the fellow CI/CD enthusiasts like me. Thanks for waiting for a few minutes, just kind of trying to set over a few things here. So just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Rajesh, and I'm a product manager from the Codestream product, which is specifically around the management business unit within VMware Cloud Automation Solutions. And today, I just want to, as part of this session, I'll be covering specific around giving an overview of vCloud Air on a high level and looking into what really means in DevOps space and why we are looking into DevOps and what solution VMware, typically it's known for the virtualization solutions that we've been offering, what we're really doing in the DevOps space here. So with that, I just want to quickly try to do a quick survey on how many of you here are developers? Okay, and how many of you are ops side of it, IT? Okay, and how many of you are DevOps people? Okay. So I'm just trying to see, like, get an understanding about, it's a good mix of folks around here. Probably will be able to understand, your needs specifically and how I can make you happy at the end of the day by trying to, answer your questions around DevOps and also what the solution is going to offer here. Again, this is a disclaimer specific to a few of the things that what I would cover in this session would be forward-looking. So let's jump on quickly with the amount of time left to get into a quick overview of vCloud Air. So VMware is known for its flagship product around vSphere and what we have been providing a solution around the ESXi and the virtualization of infrastructure and the management capabilities around it, and looking into the infrastructure as a service and building, and moving towards a transformation of software-defined data center journey. It has moved on various layers around getting into platform as a service and the end-user computing side. And here we have with vCloud Air specifically around giving a mix of both, providing the needs around the hybrid cloud requirements. Underneath, again, it's kind of been supported by a strong foundation of the vSphere product, which is known for the on-premise solution. So what really brings in is vCloud Air provides the support of a common platform around it, both for on-prem solutions and also for the cloud offerings as a public cloud in order to move your existing applications, or it could be the new applications, modern application, you call it as a cloud-native applications, to move back and forth with respect to on-prem and cloud-specific nature. And it goes without saying that it comes with a level of support with network virtualization and also the common management capabilities that would bring in by leveraging the platform that would support for both on-prem and vCloud. So here it gives you kind of an overview of what it means to the existing applications, which means that the support of the wide variety of operating systems out there, which needs to be supported through when we look into the flexibility, having the needs of any app, any OS, anywhere we need, as and when on demand. Or it could be a new application, a modern application with respect to cloud-native applications, which is where kind of a support with respect to high availability and thinking about DRS as kind of a vMotion and XVMotion kind of features, which have been kind of already supported by the vSphere or kind of leveraged within the vCloud Air, which gives you enough freedom for the teams to actually both, when they look into the DevOps side of it, when they go through the different phases of build, test, deploy, manage, and monitor lifecycle, they can kind of do both with on-prem and as well as the public cloud offering that we have provides with vCloud Air. Again, it provides a simple migration path between various, providing the cloud connector in order to either it could be the existing VMs, which is in the form of virtual appliance in an OVA format, or it could be use a vCloud connector to have a bidirectional transportation between the cloud and as well as within the on-prem vSphere or the virtual environment that you have. So this pretty much gives a high-level overview of what is the vCloud Air and how it kind of provides a hybrid nature of use cases around moving the virtual appliances in the form of applications that you want to move in various dev, test, and production lifecycle. And the path to hybrid, as part of it, comes with both subscription and on-demand purpose. Again, it fits into the needs of either it kind of predefined budget or it could be a kind of a variable form of a thing. So these things, again, gives you kind of an overview of vCloud Air. But getting back to the real purpose of this agenda to cover the DevOps aspect about how within VMware we look at the DevOps and what as a solution that we are offering. Let's get into how to get started with DevOps. It's pretty much to answer the one simple statement to make about the business agility. So when we think about the business agility, it's a form of getting into agile practices about business coming with an ask, okay, I have a specific ask to my customers is asking that I need this feature to be delivered, or there is a competitive need that our kind of competitive business is providing these kind of features, how quickly can we deliver this to the end customers? And it goes to the development team, which pretty much, as you know, that development teams these days are known for practicing any popular agile methodologies, starting with it could be lean principles or any Scrum practices, which enables them to deliver those products much more quickly, build these products much more quickly on the feature set, and push it to the delivery work stream. The real bottleneck in this workflow happens here is when it goes to the delivery mechanism. Like, how truly agile these things are when it goes to the operation and infrastructure, right? The need, the kind of objective for these kind of units, business units with respect to operations and infrastructure are different when compared to the development team, right? So the operations team is to make sure that they kind of lower the risk and make sure that they have their platform much more stable, which means that the speed in which that the development team is producing those feature sets and delivering it, is it kind of being supported by the existing practices and the tool sets which are kind of being used within the process of operations and infrastructure. At the same time, infrastructure is, again, like how often it needs to be upgraded and be supported in order to support the delivery mechanism. So really, in order to propagate this, to call it as a true agile nature to support the business agility, it's about propagating and transforming, enabling these operations and infrastructure team to interface with dev and ops part of it in kind of various form with supporting with the process and as well as the tool sets they're currently using to enable them to follow the practices. So which brings up to, if you're aware of the Scrum and Agile practices, it goes into various forms, so like starting with what actually the product supports in form of automation. In order to provide an end-to-end automation, you call it as starting with building and testing and deploying it through the continuous delivery of a release cycle. And how are those existing products integrated with the tool sets out there? It's not about like trying to rip off the existing tool sets that they're currently using and to introduce a new stream of tool sets. Rather, it's trying to leverage the existing investments in the form of tools and then try to integrate with them and glue all these pieces together to build a comprehensive story around end-to-end automation. And of course, it goes with the process. The current existing process, whether it starts with the process, whether it supports the existing teams or practicing the process which are enabling into effectively put in use of those tools and processes, products which are coming into. And it starts with the people who are involved as well. So it's people, process, and product. All these things needs an agility to be understood in the right format in order to adapt in a more effective form. So where does it actually start with the evolution of, when we look into the DevOps is pretty much, having the existing work stream, starting with how to automate the existing patch and configuration of operating systems and configuration management with respect to it. And then looking into the continuous delivery, it starts with provisioning the infrastructure, automating it, the work stream of provisioning infrastructure and providing it on demand. On top of it, having the application provisioning of supporting the application lifecycle automation to support the continuous delivery process. And with that, the later phase, which kind of in the natural propagation to the transformation in this DevOps journey comes into the adoption of PaaS and containers, which are kind of known for this cloud native apps and microservices supported through that. So this is kind of a well-known thing, but it's not truly the way that all the customers that we're looking at is kind of currently following this path. And we have typical use cases that we kind of been hearing with respect to the continuous delivery. It starts with obviously with kind of having a pre-check-in, pre-commit. It starts with the workflow, developer workflow of building it, checking into the SCM, and consuming it within the build server integration, which kind of integrate with Jenkins, or it could be Bamboo or TFS in kind of a .NET shops, and triggering the unit testing, or it could be a sys integration test workflow along with it. Our post-commit process, which is again kind of incorporating with the integration with performance or sys integration test. It's kind of a typical use case to automate to have an end-to-end continuous delivery process with part of application development. Or it could be as simple as kind of trying to pick up any kind of manual work that you're currently doing and try to orchestrate it using a workflow engine, and then try to make it much more easily to manage as part of the release cycle. And it all kind of boils down to not just kind of developer code, but itself is kind of there are various constructs with respect to when it goes to software-defined data center. It could be start of content management, content packs, which are kind of built and also has their life cycle with respect to build, test, and deploy. It could be blueprints or infrastructure as code capabilities. So those are the things that kind of currently supported by the solution, which I'm going to speak about in a while. So again, let's start with to understand how mature your current adoption is with respect to the product and the toolsets that you're currently owning. And the process, it's not just to stop with the investment in the test automation, but to propagate that to build a story, comprehensive story around the end-to-end automation to call it as a true agile continuous delivery mechanism. Again, finding the right people, whether kind of internally looking into the executive sponsorship to sponsor and adapt those, enable that continuous delivery process. So with that, what it means with CI/CD, with with Codestream and vCloud Air, is bringing in hybrid capability of the services which are kind of hosted within vCloud Air to support both on-prem as well as on the vCloud Air for the hybrid capabilities. Again, these are the popular tool sets which are kind of currently adapted within the software development lifecycle. We will kind of, I'll elaborate much more in detail in a separate slide, but it's here as an understanding to why DevOps on vCloud Air, specifically to address the needs of hybrid nature in order to extend both high CI/CD in both on-prem and as well as when it goes for a hosted solution to support on-prem and as well as a hybrid capability on the public cloud nature to support both dev and test lifecycle. And also this means what it means is to leverage the existing third-party tools and as well as the VMware toolsets which are currently hosted within the vCloud Air. So with that, I want to quickly get into the product, the core product, which I want to cover in the rest of the time, specifically around the vRealize Codestream. So vRealize Codestream is a product which a solution offering comes from the VMware, specifically targeting around the release engineering teams and the DevOps team in order to enable them to perform most reliable and rapid releases concentrating of higher quality, at the same time making sure that lowers the operational risk involved in it. And the main objective here is to, as I mentioned earlier, it's not to rip and replace the existing tools and investments, but rather to effectively leverage them with the form of understanding the SDLC process and the toolsets that currently our customers are using and try to transpose them in the form of a DevOps adoption. So here what we're looking at is the most popular SDLC. I hope that it should resonate with most of the practices that we currently have in the form of the lifecycle. Of course, it starts with a developer going and understanding taking the business requirement, building that and committing that and checking the code into the source code management system. It could be Git or Perforce Subversion or whatever you name it. And which naturally gets picked up by your build process. I assume that it's kind of the build and continuous integration process which you could have enabled with in the form of Jenkins or any other continuous integration process. and which performs the build, which packages that, and builds the binary package, which you call as a deployment unit. And it gets pushed into the repository system, which you can name it as an Artifactory, NuGet, Nexus, or whatever you name it here. And it's worth noting here that Codestream comes as a OEM support with Artifactory as an artifact management solution out of the box. What it means is when you purchase Codestream, it comes along with Artifactory in it, because our artifact management solution has been built around Artifactory here, and it acts as a proxy to resolve artifacts from various other popular repository systems. And as a last step, as you can see here, the deployment process during the deployment time is where you would think of either provisioning a new VMs and in the form of either in the on-prem or cloud when you think about dev and test phase, or it could be in a production step where you have a brownfield environment where you want to deploy on top of the existing VMs. So Codestream currently integrates with, in order to support the provisioning and deployment support, it has a tight integration with vRealize automation as a provisioning capability. And also, it supports Chef and Puppet for configuration and provisioning mechanism. And we are looking into supporting in future with Docker engines to support Docker and container deployments as part of the continuous deployment story. So what we're looking at here is a snapshot of what we call it as a release pipeline within Codestream. So Codestream comes with a modeling capability where, as a graphical user interface, the release engineer can work with the service architect to model their application release in the form of a release pipeline. It's pretty much you can think of as a release template. The code to the automation is to standardize the process that you think that it could be automated first, and to make sure that you have a provisioning of all those bindings across various tasks that you carry out. So here we're looking at the various stages, starting with the UAD, sys integration test, staging, and production. And those are, each and every stage has been comprised with various tasks that you would carry out, that you can transpose back into the SDLC process that we just spoke about. It could be started with how do you integrate with your build integration process, for which we leverage Jenkins as integration out of the box with Codestream. It would trigger the build and the test integration that you kind of configure within Jenkins. And how do you provision it? Using a provisioning mechanism that, as I just mentioned, you're leveraging the provisioning aspect. And once you provision, you want to actually deploy those artifacts, resolve those artifacts, and deploy those artifacts in the form of any packages that you created on top of those hosts that are provisioned, and then trigger the test. And again, it's most important to create this visibility across your release pipeline from end to end, and with the right checks and balances in between. So those pieces of the folders that you see in between each and every stage are called as the gating rules. The gating rules are nothing but that enables that release to be configured in a way that to define those policies in order to, you can name it as simple as long as my test cases are passing 90%, or you can call it as 100%, only then I want those release to propagate and the execution to proceed to the following stage. Or you need a manual approver. Someone has to intervene and make sure that approval goes through in order to the release to propagate to the following subsequent stages. So it gives you enough visibility to track what set of artifacts are getting deployed and where they are, and are they the right version of artifacts, which are once those are getting tested are the ones which are getting deployed in various stages and kind of being certified through the release process. So when you look into the immediate benefits, why we need to actually, by standardizing the process, what you get it is, it enables you to make sure that the release that you're carrying forward in your release process is much more consistent and repeatable and kind of more predictable in the form of a stable release platform. And gives you enough visibility into the tracking your releases and how far the releases are and how those releases are happening, and the right set of artifacts are the ones which are getting provisioned or deployed on the provision VMs. And how do you actually backtrack things into when things goes wrong? How do you measure it with kind of things that you call it as metrics like higher mean time to repair? So it provides you enough visibility to perform those troubleshooting aspects. The solution comes with the troubleshooting capability in order to enable the release engineering teams not only to provide, perform releases in a much more effective way, but when things goes wrong on a rainy day, so the team should have enough insight to perform root cause analysis and have enough visibility to perform things like perform like analytics on the logs which are getting captured, and how to perform, gain insight to what needs to be fixed in order to put back the release into a stable state. Because obviously it all kind of boils down to the cost associated with the business for the downtime for the various, to answer the various stakeholders involved in the release. So it is important for us to understand that when you step into the story of continuous delivery and continuous deployment, it is how do you address the needs of all the stakeholders involved in the release process. So it is not only the release team has to work in a much more highly collaborative environment in the form of understanding, like working with the dev, what the dev team is looking for in the release, and also the QA, DBAs, in form of like, in kind of during the release process. So it has to be much more collaborative environment, and the solution should be enabled to support each and every one's needs. And again, it's kind of eliminates, of course, by standardizing the process, making it much more repeatable. It reduces any manual overhead involved in error-prone areas, in making sure that there are kind of smooth handshakes happening between various stakeholders happening and the various stages which are followed in the release process. And leveraging, of course, the right, effectively using the right tool sets which are involved in it. So again, it's how do you build the context around enabling the various tool sets, kind of disparate tool sets which are put in practice today, right? So once you make sure that this context is kind of driven around from end to end, it makes more effective in the form of continuous delivery when you build it. So what really Codestream does is it kind of acts as a glue in order to glue all these bits and pieces together and enabling you to perform these things rather than building your own bunch of scripts and kind of building your own solution in order to do that as part of continuous delivery. So here are the few key metrics that I would like to share with respect to our continuous delivery adoption, which our IT team followed by adapting Codestream in order to perform the releases with respect to internal solutions which are built within VMware. So VMware IT today, as I speak today, are managing hundreds of applications which are currently getting released through Codestream. So what it brings in as a major key objectives that I would like to cover is there are two things, right? One is when we look at it, why the business wants to adapt to continuous delivery is to increase their productivity with respect to how quickly they can release it, which means that reducing their productivity time, the release cycles, and how stable it is, right? So it could be measured with the form of throughput, and it has improved the throughput with 2x times, and of course with the deployment time, which was by standardizing, leveraging the Codestream modeling interface, and then by bringing in a one-click button to execute those standardized releases. It has improved the deployment time to 63%, and of course, it also boils down to the cost associated with that, with respect to the enabling, replacing the existing disparate tools, and also by the man hours required to perform the releases. So here we have the extensibility story that we are currently building with respect to the REST APIs, which are currently exposed via Codestream. The Codestream comes with a very comprehensive set of REST APIs, which are currently exposed with the developer community and also the DevOps community to build their own custom plugins to support it. And of course, it comes out of the box with support with various repository systems and continuous integration systems and testing frameworks, which are depicted here. And we're looking into integrating with, in order to build a comprehensive story around end-to-end release automation as part of the continuous delivery process. We're looking into integrating with issue tracking system. Currently, we have a plugin to support with Jira, and also we're looking into integrating with Rally systems as well. So here it also gives insight to the core components that we have. So for artifact management, as I mentioned, it leverages the Artifactory as Artif OEM, which comes as an OEM with a JFrog solution in order to act as a proxy to support with all the other repository systems out there. And currently we have a workflow engine, which probably you might have heard about it, vRealize Orchestrator. So if you are currently leveraging vRealize Orchestrator to build workflows, and it lets you leverage the existing workflows that you already have built within Codestream easily to adapt to the process. So as I just mentioned, as part of the artifact management, Artifactory acts as a proxy to other repository systems out there. And what it means is, of course, it solves the complex use cases around how we want to support various repository systems, which are currently as end users, where they host their artifacts currently. In case of, it could be the Nexus, in case of Maven type of artifacts, or Yum, or it could be Artifactory instance itself. So as you can see, that Jenkins pushes those artifacts into those repository systems, and Artifactory act as a proxy to resolve that with the artifact resolution path which is defined, which I'll kind of showcase within a minute in the demo that I'm going to showcase that. And to mention here, we have a bidirectional integration with Jenkins. What it means is we have an open source plugin, which is already out there as a Jenkins plugin. It has an integration with Jenkins out of the box within the Codestream to leverage any Jenkins jobs, workflows that you have defined within Jenkins to be configured through Codestream and call Codestream Jenkins as part of a build and continuous integration story within Codestream. And also, using this Jenkins plugin out there with Codestream, you can actually go to the Jenkins job and configure a Codestream plugin to call from Jenkins to the Codestream. What it means is, at the end of the day, you can trigger any Codestream pipelines, which are release pipelines that you might have modeled, to be called from within the Jenkins job. So it lets you define your various constructs of Codestream execution pipeline, which you call it as an execution ID or execution status. All those inputs can be configured within the Jenkins plugin, and could be, outputs could be, responses could be listened within the Jenkins plugin as well. So I would definitely encourage you to, if you're, adapting as part of adoption to Codestream, would try out this Jenkins plugin. And no further delay, I just would like to quickly get into the product demo, which would, more than me speaking about it, I would let the demonstration give you enough insight to what it does. So as part of this demonstration, it's kind of bringing up, we're looking at the Codestream user interface where I'm defining a demo pipeline. And the demo pipeline, as you can see that, it lets you define your pipeline and on a high level, the description, and also the pipeline parameters that you want to define. It could be starting with the build ID or the application server name, or it could be the ports that you want to you want to provision as part of your continuous deployment process. So those are the properties which we call it as a pipeline release properties that could be defined within the user interface here. And once you define this application server name and application server port, and it lets you define your notification email as part of the email notification that you would want to trigger and send it to as part of the deployment listener. It would, you can define your email notification here, and also it lets you tag with various tags which could be used for various advanced search capabilities when you look into, pipeline search within this Codestream interface. So within this modeling, I'm bringing up defining various stages. It's kind of adding 3 different stages here. One is the test and system integration, and as well as the production. And we call it as a staging here. And by clicking on the add task, I'm defining the various tasks here. And as a first task, I want to define as a provisioning task. And I'm going to leverage the serialize provisioning capability here, and I'm naming it as a provisioning a web app server. Again, so as you're looking at this proceeding with the demo, so we're defining what you want to do, and we later move on to how you want to do. So we're currently looking into what you want to do. So once you provision the app server, you want to define an artifact resolution path. So you define an artifact task where you leverage the artifact resolution within that, how you want to resolve your various artifacts which are going in this release. And the next one is you define your deployment task. You want to deploy using a custom script on the provision machine by using the artifacts once resolved. And once you deploy it, you want to test it. You want to make sure that you trigger your test through Jenkins. And Jenkins is used as a test automation provider as an endpoint, which is configured within Codestream instance here. So I'm saying call it as a test task. Test the web app once it has been deployed. So it's pretty much once you define what, and let's get into how. So which is where you want to configure each of these tasks here. And within this provisioning task, I'm bringing up the provisioning app server. So as I mentioned, it is leveraging the vRealize automation as an endpoint here, and it brings up the blueprint, which is the infrastructure blueprint. I'm calling it as you want to deploy provision of CentOS machine, and you want to just deploy one machine, and the number of lease time, CPU, memory usage, and all the compute resource configuration could be configured within the Codestream instance here. Pretty much, it lets you bring in the provisioning capability within the Codestream by leveraging the provisioning engine underneath. It leverages here. So once it provisions, it would pretty much each and every task could be thought through as and it takes a bunch of listens to the input that you define, and it performs certain actions and gives you certain output. So it gives, as part of this provisioning aspect, the output that you would get is the IP once it is provisioned. So as the next task, we are moving into the artifact task, where you want to identify the artifact which you want to leverage as part of this release. It lets you search through the regular expressions. I'm just kind of giving it a star and choosing the Duke's Bank app, which is a web app, as a form of artifact which is already pushed into this artifact repository, which I've selected here as a my demo repository. So once I define that artifact which needs to be resolved, I'm getting into the deploy task. And the deploy task, I'm defining, so the machine, which is basically the app server, which is provisioned by the provisioning task, which is the one which which is going to be available to me to this particular task as a runtime, is the reason I'm just kind of defining as a parameter here as an app server, would be leveraged to provision and deploy the artifacts which I'm configured here. So here it lets you define the credentials to the host and pick up the install script, which you call it as the deploy script, which you want to leverage for this deployment purpose. And I'm picking up the script type, which is currently out of the box. We support both the bash script in the form of bash script and as well as the PowerShell to support the Windows deployment. So once you define the deployment, I'm just leveraging the Jenkins test job here, and I'm defining the test URL. Pretty much, it leverages the app server, which is, again, would be dynamically populated during the execution time and would be made available to this particular task, and define this test string as well to be leveraged. And as I mentioned, this is the gating policy here. I'm leveraging the threshold, test acceptance threshold, that I want to make sure that as long as it passes through a certain test threshold in this form, I'm defining as a 90%. As long as it meets the 90% of test threshold, I'll let this gating rule to be succeed. And underneath, as I mentioned, it's nothing but a workflow, and it would execute that workflow to make sure that it complies to that testing criteria that I'm defining within here. So once I define this, it could be easy to execute them. As a part of standardization, as I just mentioned, you would deploy, kind of model this pipeline, and then get into this execution time, and then you would get access to execution time, runtime parameters that you want to pass. So here we're looking at a pre-executed pipeline where it is currently waiting as an approval, waiting for an approval from a supervisor. So it gets into an approval system within this Codestream. We're just leveraging the workflow notification within the inbox of Codestream. So it's waiting for the supervisor approval, and it gives you a customized message which you could be defined within the Codestream, saying, it is currently waiting on this particular stage, and it waits for the submission of the approval from the supervisor. Once the approver submits the approval, and it would continue the execution from where it has passed currently. And as you can see, that currently showcases the input of this particular provisioning task, where you can see the IP has been populated on the provision. This is the IP, and also all the inputs which are currently configured during the modeling time. And the Selenium test is nothing but, again, as we mentioned, it showcases that it's kind of the integration with the Jenkins job, which showcases the input that you configured during the modeling time and showcases what happened during the execution part of it by executing that job within the Jenkins process. So it lets you browse through the various capabilities of once the workflow has been executed. You can drill down into each and every particular task to inspect upon what you configured within it and what was the output which was generated as part of the execution process. So not only that, we are currently looking at one of the failed test. And what it means is the failed test has failed with a particular error, and when you view that error, it's kind of timed out because of refuse the connection to a particular provision machine. And as part of the troubleshooting, as I mentioned, Codestream supports 2 out-of-the-box capabilities. One is to compare and contrast between the pre-executed pipelines. So it lets you quickly get into what has really changed from the previous execution in order for this particular execution to fail. And as well as it provides insight to upload the logs and within the Codestream to make sure that it kind of keep that as a prefetch log within the Codestream as a centralized log accessible. So this kind of summarizes it quickly on what as Codestream brings in the capability around both the modeling time and as well as a post-execution process, how you can actually inspect to the various steps within the Codestream of the pipeline. So I just want to quickly conclude with specific things around we have built and come up with the specific things around the content management capability in order to serve the DevOps for IT, which means that not only for the dev and test phase of the codes, which are getting source code, which are getting built by the development team, but also as part of the SDLC objects with kind of content, anything that you think as part of the content could be also managed as an out-of-the-box predefined pipeline templates, which are going to be shipped as a content management pack. So that supports the story around all the SDLC objects, which could be easily managed as part of the content management pack, which we plan to deliver within the upcoming few weeks. It easily kind of enables in the IT in order to follow all the DevOps processes to quickly build and test those content within the Codestream by leveraging the Codestream capabilities. So in conclusion, I just want to summarize that what it means to pretty much with respect to the DevOps process is the deployment time in which that by adapting to the true end-to-end automation, it brings in the capability of reducing the hours of deployment time to minutes and hours by standardizing the operation process by true end-to-end nature, and also improves the deployment success rate by making it more consistent, predictable, and reliable release pipelines. It improves it to much more aggressive state of 90% or better with respect to the release process, and at the same time, it reduces any operational risk involved in any manual overhead or a manual handoff happening currently with the semi-automated way of continuous delivery adoption. So of course, it gives you more room to look into the application quality and improving the application quality. And it all boils down to the cost savings associated with that, which means that it makes your business happier with respect to saving more dollars to the adoption of continuous delivery. So with that, I just want to conclude this talk, and I would be happy to answer any specific questions probably you may have with respect to what I really covered in this session, or with respect to a specific aspect about how VMware is looking into the DevOps adoption. Thank you.